My mom likes our new house and she in with us starting today.
My husband said.
If you don't want to live with us, leave.
My mother-in-law said. I didn't understand what they meant. I'm Jenny, 27 years old, a housewife currently pregnant. My husband's name is Lucas, and he is 30 years old. He works in an office. When I got pregnant, I knew that I would be crying at night with a baby and raising my child in a small apartment. Now, when building a new house, there will be a meeting with the architect. I was soaring. I want a kitchen like this one. It's beautiful. I think everyone dreams of the ease and the design they like, and it makes them feel excited. I was so happy to have a baby and a house. However, I had a worry. Every time we had a meeting with the architect, my mother-in-law was always present.
Why does your mother attend the meeting?
I asked my husband.
She did the renovation of my parent 3 years ago, so I should get son for my senior mother.
At one meeting, my mother-in-law said,
We need one more large room. There is a large space for the Buddhist altar.
What? That big Buddhist altar you have.
It's an old-fashioned Buddhist altar in my parents-in-law's house. She wants to have a space for it in our house.
And you want an additional room? It would become difficult to take see house if we had so much more rooms need.
I said.
You need to have a lot of rooms where a house.
She made a single-minded statement.
Why does your mother decide everything in the house when she won't even live there?
My mom is a senior home ordering pro because she's experienced in remodeling her own homes. Besides, I've never made a mistake by listening to my mom.
He replied.
But when are you going to take the altar? We live separately, and that will be after your father and mother have passed away. So if it's time we could think about what to do with that, we cannot have that big one at our...
I argued.
Are you trying to speak badly of my... Ooh, do you think you are?
He was just like that, not listening. I didn't want to make space for an altar, so I decided to negotiate with my mother-in-law again at the next meeting.
The room for the Buddhist altar is a dead space.
Is said.
You think so because you are still. When you reach 80, you'll be more comfortable with more rooms, or you'll feel more at home with the altar because I am the same way. Oh, please get rid of those steps, barrier-free home, and add handrails on the stairs.
My mother-in-law did not listen to me. In the end, the house was built with a layout that my mother-in-law wanted. Barrier-free, handrails on the staircase, provide extra room for a large Buddhist altar in the future. I tried to prevent it until the cons began.
My mom is professional. She can't be, don't speak ill of her.
My husband kept repeating it so I could discuss it with him. I couldn't talk back strongly about it because the house is being built on my father-in-law's land. If we don't have to pay for the land, the amount of repayment would be less. However, if we put all of my mother's wishes into the house, the construction would naturally increase. I was very annoyed that I had to pay additional costs to add more space or because of my mother-in-law's wishes. The architect understood the situation, suggesting that we could reduce the elimination of some parts. He made some suggestions to reduce.
Money will come back to you if you comfortably.
That's what my mother-in-law said. Well, the new house was completed. I was very happy to see the new house. The smell of the new wallpaper made me feel fluttery. Newly built houses smell perfect. A few days after we moved in, my mother-in-law and father-in-law came with a housewarming gift.
Thank you so much for your help in building our beautiful new home.
I thanked my father-in-law. In fact, it is. I feel that we probably would not have been approved for a large loan if we had not only the house, but also the land. My father-in-law smiled.
The smell of a new house is so nice. Now you're ready to welcome a baby's grandfather. I couldn't be happier.
he said, his eyes narrowing at the sight of his yet-to-be-seen grandchild. My husband showed them around the new house, proudly displaying the Buddhist altar. All that remained was waiting for them to arrive. But then something unexpected happened. While we were having breakfast, a moving company arrived at our house.
The packages arrived.
I had no idea what was going on. Anyway, I opened the door,
I asked him if he had the wrong address.
but the address was right. I was puzzled because I didn't under situation. I heard the sound of a bicycle warning. Tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. It was my mother-in-law. She parked her bike in front of the truck and pointed at its contents with a straight posture and instructed,
Put this here and this one there.
What is going on?
The scene was so sudden that I was for words. Then my husband, who had heard came out of the front door. Scratching his head, he said,
My mom loved the room so much that my parents are going to stay there starting today.
What?
Their belongings were suddenly brushed by the movers, and then I was told that we had to live together. How is this possible? Then my mother-in-law said,
What are you just standing there, Lil? Get out of the way of the moving in process.
She grabbed my shoulder and pushed me. No, I'm not just standing here. I'm here in a daze. If I had been in good health, I would have said that back. But there was so much information that my head couldn't keep up. My mother-in-law seemed to have a pale complexion.
I've been thinking about moving in since the meeting with the architect. At first, I was listening to you for some advice, but gradually your house closed in on my ideal and it was done. Your house was just perfect. So we decided to move in together. But what's wrong with you? Are you dissatisfied? If you don't like living together, leave. This land belongs to my husband, so house.
The Buddhist altar room is for the crib and cradle. I was thinking about adding a baby stuff section. The empty room was supposed to be the room, but now it's going to be the in-laws' room, and I'm being evicted. I couldn't accept the situation, so the wind outside was still cold, ever it was early spring. It was just the right temperature to head down. My cooled head started to spin. Then I came to a question. Wait a minute. What about your parents-in-law's house, which was fully remodeled 3 years ago? When I visited, my father-in-law was at the front door.
Edward,
He looked back at me and said, brief.
Let's go to your home.
When I returned to my new house with my father-in-law, the move was almost finished. The moving van was no longer there.
What did you come back for? Do you mean you agreed to live with? Are you prepared to be thrown out?
My mother-in-law, who was having tea with her husband in the living room, was grilling me.
If you're gonna leave, you'll have your own things.
My father-in-law stood in front of my mother-in-law, who said something like that.
Hey, we are leaving. If you don't want, get out of my house.
My mother-in-law dropped her teacup, which was filled with red tea, on the table.
Why? Lucas has agreed to let you stay with us too, right?
My mother-in-law asked my husband. Lucas nodded quickly.
Because Mom said she wanted to do
He said, as if it were a matter of course. Hearing this, my father-in-law was very angry.
How long are you going to keep put? Blind faith in your mother. You're already 30 years old. You're mentally independent.
I had never seen my father-in-law, always so mild-mannered, get so loudly angry. My husband's shoulders shook with a sob in his voice.
Your mom has changed.
My father-in-law muttered in a muffled voice.
Where did you get the idea that if you make a lot of money, you'll be comfortable?
He asked my mother-in-law. I was surprised to hear such a familiar phrase.
I heard that too, she said during a meeting with the architect.
I said so.
I knew it.
My father-in-law nodded and said, That's what happened so far.
She said she would spend money on it. Then it would be returned to her. Her belief in Buddhism escalated. She sent a fish in a lottery about a bound, because she believed she would be doubled in value and return to her original investment.
Entrusting a fish and double the more.
I didn't even have time to ask back.
It's a true story, you know,
My mother-in-law exclaimed in a tone of annoyance.
because that's what it said on the.
Internet.
I was so surprised that I shouted louder than my mother-in-law.
Is it based on information from the where anything can be false or true?
I spoke my words little by little. My mother-in-law's belief in Buddhism is based on information from the internet. If you trust a fish and entrust it with 5,000, they will double the amount and return it to you. I was surprised that the basis for internet research, but my mother-in-law was very serious.
Yes, you should search for money-saving spells and find them.
My mother-in-law pushed her phone into my face. I couldn't hold back any longer.
What do you mean search for a spell?
What are you laughing at?
How could I not laugh? My mother-in-law turned red and screamed like a monkey, and I couldn't stop laughing. Beside her, my father-in-law said,
Yeah, if it wasn't for my wife, I would have been fired too.
Looking at my father-in-law, I couldn't help but stop laughing. It would have been unforgivable if hard-earned money had been used in this way. My father-in-law continued, I'm not saying that you should never use a credit card, but I am saying that you need to be careful with them.
That's why I wanted to help you guys. Still had my saving, because one day I thought she was going to get her hard land.
Then he looked at his wife.
I don't want all of you to be victims of your wife's wrong thinking. I thought enduring it and letting my what she wants would be for the sake unborn grandchild.
But my husband interrupted my father's explanation.
What the hell are you going to talk about my mom to, Dad?
My husband stood in front of my mouth as if he was defending her. I was annoyed by this situation. What is the attitude of your husband when he talks to you and your father? I would never forgive them. I wanted to protect my father-in-law. In return for my husband standing up for me with his mother, I stood up for him with mine. And I nipped at my husband.
Your mother thinks that she's always right, and you think that your mother is always right. It's the same thing. Your mother and you are really unfit for adults who cannot discern the truth from false information.
My father-in-law has had to endure his wife's extravagant spending habits throughout their lives, and I was probably the first person to stand up for him,
Thank you, Jenny.
he said in a small voice.
I thought I had given you the least you build a new house on my land. But at the same time, I was already out of savings because of my wife's medical bills. Then she suggested we go to Lucas, where people and money gather. There must be money or something like that.
It's not about the truth or false internet information. It's a problem with your mother-in-law's personality. She's completely like her hermit crab going from shell to shell. But my husband and mother-in-law did not.
But of course, you go where the money is.
And if Mom wants to move in with us,
That's why Lucas built us an extra, agreed to take over the Buddhist alt.
Saying mom's always right and dad's always right, and the two of them yelling and screaming. These two cannot be saved anymore. Father-in-law and I looked at each other. If I had been at the beginning of my relationship with this husband, I would have said yes to everything he asked me to do. But now that I know how my father-in-law feels, I cannot simply leave. I felt a surge of righteous indignation. I had to make them go away for my father-in-law's sake, because he is the future grandfather baby.
Firstly, Grace, you are wrong.
I told my mother-in-law directly.
You say it's written on the internet. Well, why don't you search for lucky crap or something? Seriously, no, I don't deny that you want to make more money. It's practical for you to go to work and earn your own money rather than entrusting it to lottery tickets at a shrine. At the very least, if you had applied yourself to finding a part-time job, you would have earned a few $100s by now. And then you realize, what kind of effort does it take to tens of hundreds? How hard your husband worked to earn the amount of money. You bought the lottery tickets you gave to the shrine?
I told my mother-in-law that much, and now I've turned the blade of my own husband.
And you, who believe your mother, so you assume everything is right and even, notice that you are about to be regulated, will not be capable of math. In other words, it's a divorce.
My husband's voice trailed off, unexpectedly taking the conversation to the point of divorce. In contrast, my mother-in-law is a very different person.
Fine. Get out of here.
My mother-in-law spat at me. However, it was my father-in-law who took care of my mother's strong spirit once.
You are divorcing me too.
My father-in-law firmly told her. My mother-in-law looked back at my father-in-law. However, there was no way she could have known my father-in-law.
In the first place, I never thought live with my son and his wife. That house has just been remodeled, and I will continue to live there. Just as Jenny gave up on Lucas, I do the energy to support you anymore. Marry the internet, or whatever. And that land is still in my name. You get out. You can do whatever you want with your mother, who you believe in. That house belongs to Jenny and her baby. The baby should grow up with someone who makes good decisions.
Thus, my husband and I got a divorce. 6 months later, we received the divorce settlement my father-in-law and I remained in. The house we owned, while my husband's mother was evicted from her home. My brainwashed husband kept telling his mother was right on all fronts.
Then why don't you and your mother live together as you wish?
I told him, and then he said,
Yes, I will.
they started living together, and after that, I heard that my ex-husband visited my father-in-law.
Even if I do, as Mom says, the money increase. I want you to lend me money.
My father-in-law said that he sent. My father-in-law has retired and is still working as a contracted employee. He enjoys going to a chess club
Now that she's gone, I can save more money.
and sometimes he bought toys and was come and visit his grandchild. When the grandson started to laugh,
I date someone.
my father-in-law told me shyly, the partner seems to be a member of club.
She is a very intelligent person with tactics. She seems to have chosen me after careful consideration.
That sounds great.
My father-in-law and I had big smiles on our faces.